what is up, Sleep Tribe? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Healthy Sleep Revolution podcast. I am your host, Dr. Meghna Dasani. Today, I have a doctor I have admired from afar for way too long, and it is my honor and pleasure to be able to have Dr. Nishi Bhopal on our show today. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's so delightful. I mean, I've admired you from afar as well. So it's nice to finally
Thanks.
connect.
I know. It's like, you think the world is such a big place, and then social media just, it's like, I've known her forever. Or maybe I stalk her forever is more like it. But Dr. Nishi is actually board certified in psychiatry in sleep medicine as well as integrative holistic medicine. Did I get that right?
Yep.
And for those that are interested, I will have her bio in our show notes. So you can go in and make sure you can read up about all the cool stuff she is doing and that she has planned. We were just talking about some cool stuff, and we'll get into it at the very end of the show for those that are listening in. I will also have a link to all of her websites, her social media. I would say follow her. She has a lot of cool stuff. Jumping right into the 60 million questions that I think I have for you. Let's dive into, and this is something that I know a lot of parents come to me, and I know I wish I'd had as, when my kids were little too. I hear you frequently talk about a three-part framework, right? To help address sleep issues. Let's dive into that and let's get into the nitty-gritties.
Great. Well, the thing with sleep is that it often feels very murky, right? Like when you're not sleeping well, or you know someone who's not sleeping well, it can be hard to figure out what's actually going on. And so I use this three-part framework both for clinicians. So if you're, a physician, therapist, dentist working with patients who have sleep issues, you can use this framework. Or if you're trying to just figure it out, this can be really helpful to give you something tangible to work on. So the three parts are the circadian rhythm, the sleep drive, and hyperarousal. So I call this the CSH framework. And we can go into the different aspects of those pieces, but I can just share very briefly. The circadian rhythm is essentially your body clock. So that's your sleep timing, but it also affects the timing of other things. So like hormone secretion, when your body's producing melatonin and cortisol, when your body feels hungry, even things like thyroid hormone secretion and things like this. These are all influenced by the circadian rhythm. And we can modify that with light exposure, particularly regulating the timing of light exposure, regulating the timing of meals, and also regulating the timing of physical activity. The next piece is the sleep drive, which is essentially the pressure that we have to fall asleep. Like, as we stay awake, we get a buildup of a neurotransmitter called adenosine. And that adenosine neurotransmitter is one of the things that makes us feel sleepy at night. So the longer we're awake, the more adenosine builds up, and the higher our sleep drive is at the end of the day. So we can leverage that. And then the third piece is the H, or the hyperarousal, which is our nervous system. So if you're in a state of stress, you're in a fight, flight, or freeze state, or if your body is activated because of other things, it could be anxiety, depression, mental health type things, PTSD, or if you have some kind of a sleep disorder like obstructive sleep apnea, or if there's something else going on, high blood pressure, other things that could be contributing, then that's going to increase your hyperarousal, which is also going to impact your circadian rhythm and sleep drive, and maybe might even override those things and make it hard to sleep. So those are the three pieces you can think through when you're figuring out what's going on with sleep issues.
Yeah, that is huge because I was sitting there listening to it and I was like, oh, yes, adenosine. And this is why I don't want to have coffee as I get closer, like, right after like lunchtime is when I want my coffee. And I'm like, that's when we need to. So I love that you mentioned hormones and melatonin and all of that. How do all of these supplements, and you talked about food, when to eat, that's a good one, or when not to eat. How does all of that fit into the picture? And actually, I guess part two of the question would be like, what would a holistic approach to sleep then look like, or what should it look like for us?
Yeah, so one of the first things that I recommend to people is if they're trying to optimize their sleep or improve their sleep quality is to really focus on timing, because that has such a direct impact on sleep quality and also your sleep schedule. And studies show that actually focusing on a consistent wake up time has more of a significant impact on overall health than sleep duration, or the amount of time you're sleeping, right? So if you can really focus on a consistent wake time and setting yourself up during the day for good sleep, Like I always say to people that good sleep starts during the day. It's not just about the thing that you do like an hour before you go to bed, but what you do first thing in the morning is going to impact your nighttime sleep. So simple things that people can do. One is that consistent wake time, and we don't have to be super rigid about that, right? So just within about an hour of the same time every day. I know that's not always possible for people if they're working, shift work or something like this, but generally speaking, within an hour of the same time every day, weekdays and weekends included, which can also be difficult. But that's really, really impactful, followed by bright light exposure in the morning. And then this is the one that a lot of my patients often just don't make the connection with, but it's having their meals around the same time every day, because mealtime sends a signal to the circadian rhythm also. So even if you have a consistent wake time, you're getting your bright light, but you're having, maybe you're skipping meals or you're having lunch at, 11 a.m. some days and not at all other days, or maybe as late as 2 p.m., that also can throw your circadian rhythm off track. If you think about, so like I have a dog, right? So he's on a schedule. Like he just knows he has an internal clock that is really on point. So he knows exactly when to wake up. He knows exactly at 6 p.m. That's his meal time. That's his dinner time. Like he'll come to me at 5:59 p.m. and stare at me. Like somehow he knows, right? So animals have that innate intelligence because our body thrives on regularity and routines. So I really encourage people to go back to the basics with this because it can really have a big impact.
This is interesting. I feel like your talk, she somehow knows that I skip breakfast some days. And then on weekends, I try to make up with like a 6-course breakfast slash brunch. Let's dive into this a little bit. What should it look like ideally? And I know it's like, do we want to have the same meals every day at the same time? Or is there a time frame, like you mentioned, for the wake up? Like, let's dive into that.
Great. Okay. So I kind of take a little bit of an Ayurvedic view of it. So if people don't know what Ayurveda is, it's the traditional system of healing from India. It's, thousands of years old. There's a lot of wisdom in there, and especially with regard to the circadian rhythm. Like I just find that so fascinating because what Ayurveda knew like 5,000 years ago is very aligned with modern circadian science. So generally speaking, in Ayurveda, our digestive fire is strongest in the middle of the day. So that's when we want to have our primary meal of the day. So middle of the day, meaning, 11 to 1 p.m., like kind of in that range. Again, this is not an exercise in rigidity because that can start to create more anxiety. So do it with a spirit of being nurturing to oneself, nourishing yourself with a spirit of curiosity. Let me try this and see how it feels versus, oh my God, I didn't get my meal in time and now I'm not going to sleep well. We don't want to fall into that trap, right? So paying attention to your body, seeing what works for you, but trying to be, on a schedule more or less the same every day. And your schedule is going to be different from my schedule. It's going to be different from the next person's schedule because we all have different lifestyles and routines and obligations and things like that. So you have to figure out what works for you and then try to be consistent with that every single day. If you should, the other question was, should you be eating the same stuff every day? Not necessarily. In fact, it's good to have a variety of different foods in the diet, and you don't have to get all of your nutrients in every meal every single day. This is another idea from Ayurveda, and I think in Western thinking, we often feel like we have to get all our nutrients in every meal and it all has to be square and balanced, and it's just not realistic. So think about over the course of a week or over the course of a month, having a lot of diversity in the different types of foods that you're eating, which also is going to impact the microbiome.
Yes.
And I can share a little bit about that, or I can pause there if we want to.
No, go on. Yes, I'm all ears. Yes.
Okay, good. So the microbiome essentially refers to, so I'm talking about the gut microbiome specifically here. So the gut microbiome refers to all the organisms, the trillions of organisms that live in our gut that impact our overall health, can impact mental health. These little bugs sort of digest the food that we consume, and then they produce byproducts that actually impact our health. So microbiome and sleep research is still in its infancy. There's a lot of data that still needs to be collected on the direct correlation between the microbiome and sleep, but we do know that people who have a more diverse microbiome, so lots of different kinds of organisms in their microbiome, it's better. It's better for your overall health and it's better for your sleep quality, versus studies are showing that people who have sleep issues tend to have a less diverse microbiome. And how do you get a more diverse microbiome? It's by eating lots of different kinds of foods, specifically lots of different kinds of plants, and prebiotics like fiber, and also getting probiotics in your diet. So these are things like yogurt and kimchi, fermented things, sauerkraut.
Yeah.
Not.
And vitamin D plays into all of this as well.
Yeah,
So
yes.
perfect. Perfect. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say with vitamin D, yes. So vitamin D is also just such a fascinating vitamin and hormone. It's actually a hormone,
Hormone,
right? And we
yes.
get it from light exposure. So just kind of tying it all together with getting that bright light exposure, sunlight exposure during the day. It also is going to help us get our vitamin D. And then when people have deficiencies in vitamin D, which I see all the time, even though I live in California where it's sunny, most of us are indoors most of the day because, you know, we're working in offices or working from home or whatnot. So I see vitamin D deficiency all the time. It's going to impact energy levels. It can impact sleep. Vitamin D is involved in regulating circadian rhythm, and it's also involved in gut health because when people have deficiencies in vitamin D, it can cause things like leaky gut. So it's implicated in so many different.
Yes. And just, bringing to point the fact that you mentioned about exposure to sunlight in the morning. And yes, our skin gets that to make the vitamin D, but just as a caution to, it's funny because I used to be one of those that did that. You step out into the morning sunlight to take your walk, and what do? We put on our sunglasses. And sometimes we want to leave them off, right? What are your thoughts on that?
That's such a great point. So this is what I tell people to do is people may have heard this kind of 10 before 10 idea on social media, which is essentially getting 10 minutes of bright sunlight exposure before 10 a.m. And so I do recommend that. And when you get bright light exposure, you want to go outside without your sunglasses, as you said, because you want to get the maximum intensity of light exposure. And also don't wear a hat with a brim because you don't want to have anything obstructing that sunlight exposure. It's important that the sun reaches the eyes. That's how it has the impact on the circadian rhythm. From a skin protection perspective, just to please any dermatologists who are listening, do wear your sunscreen. That is important to wear sunscreen. But we want to be getting that maximum bright light exposure by not obstructing light getting into the eyes.
Yes, very, very important point right there. Jumping back into our nutrients and supplements and other fun stuff, tell me your thoughts and your outlook on melatonin. I see so much of, in my practice, it's not uncommon to have a mom come in whose child is struggling with sleep issues and for them to very proudly say one gummy does nothing for them. I have to give them 2 or 3 for them to be even fall asleep. And in words, I'm just like it's not candy. So touch upon that. And what are your thoughts? What do you recommend?
This is such an important topic, and we could do a whole thing just on melatonin itself, probably. It's really interesting, and my views on melatonin keep changing as the research keeps evolving on it. So let me just start by touching on the gummies. Like you said, gummies are not candies, and I get very concerned about the quality of supplements that people are taking, because if you go to Target or Safeway or any grocery store, you'll see lots of different kinds of melatonin supplements on the shelf, and it can be hard to figure out what's good, what's not good, what to avoid. So what I do recommend to people is make sure if you're taking melatonin that it's a third-party tested supplement. There are certain brands that are third-party tested. I have a video on my YouTube channel about how to look for that. But because there was a few studies recently, there's actually one that came out, I think it was a couple years ago now, on melatonin gummies, showing that they looked at like 25 different brands of gummies, and some of those gummies didn't even have any melatonin in them at all. And instead they had CBD in them, or other things like serotonin. And other gummies just didn't have the amount of melatonin that was stated on it. So when I hear someone say like, one gummy doesn't work for me, I have to take 3, well, maybe it's because the gummy doesn't actually have the melatonin in it that it says it does, or the amount that it says it does. So you want to be using a good quality supplement. Now, the next piece is, should you even be taking melatonin supplements? So the short answer is it depends. Melatonin is a body clock regulator. So that's how I use it with my patients, or even personally, I do take melatonin sometimes, and I use it when my body clock gets off track. It's actually not indicated by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine for chronic insomnia. It is indicated for circadian rhythm issues. So when people have issues with their body clock, it's also indicated for other types of disorders. There's something called REM behavior disorder. So there's data for use in that. For children, it is used for kids with autism and ADHD and other neurological type conditions. It actually can be very useful in those kids. So again, it should be used in its kind of high quality form and third-party supplement tested. For adults, same things kind of apply. So it should be good quality. It can be used to help kind of regulate the body clock, can be used for I really think of it more as supporting sleep. So not as a sedative that you're going to take and this is going to make me sleep, but if you need a bit of sleep support, after the age of 55, melatonin secretion by the pineal gland in the brain decreases. So melatonin is produced naturally in the brain, and that secretion decreases with age. So for people over 55, it may be useful for them to take 1 or 2 milligrams of melatonin per night to supplement that decrease in secretion. Certain medications can also deplete melatonin. So like SSRIs like fluoxetine or Prozac, which is commonly used, or beta blockers like propranolol, metoprolol, those kinds of things. So for patients taking those things, supplementing with melatonin can be helpful. So it's a complicated subject, as you can tell, right? Like there's lots of different ways.
Fascinating for sure. But
Yeah.
I think the concern comes from patients thinking, oh, I don't sleep well, or I guess I can take this to help me sleep better, right? Instead of working with somebody like you or their physician to figure out what and how much, more importantly, for how long. That's always been my concern, where people use it as a crutch instead of let's use it in conjunction with what my body needs. So that's always been a big issue for me, that sometimes causes me to go on a rant against it. But that was very good clarity, and I truly appreciate that insight. Sure.
Yeah, and I'll just comment on that too, because what you said is just so important. And this is true of any supplement, whether it's melatonin or someone's taking valerian or L-theanine or ashwagandha or anything else that they find over the counter. Like if you go to the store and you look at sleep supplements, there's so many different ones out there. And I share the same concern as you, which is that sometimes if people start relying on these supplements to help them sleep, they might actually be missing an underlying sleep disorder. And so they may actually have obstructive sleep apnea or a circadian rhythm disorder or restless leg syndrome or something else that might be going on that is being either masked by a supplement, or people are trying all of these things on their own, thinking, well, I don't really need to see somebody because I'm able to sleep with this supplement. And that can become dangerous if there's something else underpinning the sleep issues that isn't being addressed.
Switching gears to sleep optimization, what are some of your top tips to help optimize sleep, creating that environment in the bedroom? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I would go back to that CSH framework. So making sure you're addressing all of those pieces. So the regularity of your daily schedules and routines. Now, in the evening, well, actually, let me just backtrack. During the day, something that's really important to do is to regulate your nervous system, because this is something that I see people do all the time, is that they're on the go, you're stressed out, you're at work, or, you're shuttling your kids around from activity to activity. And then at the end of the day, it's nighttime and people want to just fall asleep like a snap, and it doesn't work that way, because if the nervous system is in this hyperactive state all day, it's not just going to shut off and allow you to go to sleep. And even if you do a little bit of meditation, so patients will tell me, well, I tried Headspace for 10 minutes and it didn't help me, or I did the Calm app and it didn't work for me. There must be something wrong with me. I can't sleep. I have insomnia. I need to take all these supplements, so I hear this all the time. And so what I advise people to do is really focus on calming your nervous system during the day. And even if you're super busy, you've got all these things going on, there's still things you can do, which I call micro practices that you can do. And the idea here is we want to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. There's two aspects to our autonomic nervous system called sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic is the fight, flight, and freeze response, which is necessary for us to be up and on the go. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest response. And that is necessary to be active in order to fall asleep. So there's ways we can activate it during the day, whether it's should I share the micro practices or?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay. So the micro practices can help you activate that parasympathetic nervous system. So you can do this with breathing. And when I say micro practice, these are things that you can do in just a few seconds. It's free. You don't need any resources. You don't need to schedule time out to go to yoga class or anything like that. These are the things you can do right now on the spot. Even as you're listening to this conversation, you can do it. So breathing is one of them, which is you just take a couple of deep breaths, focusing on a longer exhalation. And so, like, how I build this into my day is I do it before and after every meeting. I usually have meetings every hour or so. So you can do it like that or pick a checkpoint. The other thing is just to close your eyes for a few minutes, just for not even a few minutes, sorry, a few seconds. Right? So like just close your eyes for 5 seconds or 10 seconds and maybe do the deep breathing. Don't do it while you're driving, obviously, but you can do it, right? But you can do this and it's going to help reduce external stimuli and just be very calming to your brain and your nervous system. Another thing you can do is just a light stretch. So wherever you are, you can just kind of roll out your shoulders, stretch your arms, touch your toes wherever you are, and it just takes a few seconds again. And these are things you can do to calm your nervous system during the day. Then in the evening, I do recommend having a little bit of a runway about an hour before bed where you start to wind down. I don't recommend, I mean, for some people, like it's useful for them to have a routine. You know, I have some patients who are like, yep, this is my bedtime routine. It works for me. Great. If that works for you, then you do that. But again, what can happen is there can be some rigidity and anxiety around that. If I don't do these 10 things properly, I'm not going to be able to sleep. And we don't want to fall into that pattern. So what I do suggest is create a bedtime menu for yourself or a relaxation menu. You can actually write it out just like a menu, and you have, 5-10 things on there that you can pull from that, help you relax. And it's going to be different for everyone. So it could be things like taking an Epsom salt bath. It could be something like watching a show that you enjoy that's fun and relaxing, not a, murder mystery or something that's going to activate your true crime or something like that, but something calming and fun. It could be listening to music. It could be reading a book, whatever it is. But having a bit of that runway for yourself and not trying to force sleep here. We're not trying to do these things to make you fall asleep, but it's just a way to unwind and to relax.
Awesome. Great, great stuff. I know those that are listening are writing it down because I almost want to start making notes here. As we wind up today's episode, where can our listeners find?
Yeah, so people can find me on YouTube at IntraBalance, it's INTRA Balance. And then I'm on Instagram as well. I think you'll put the link in the show notes.
We sure will.
Instagram's at
Yes.
IntraBalance.
And I know she has some exciting news coming up pretty soon. So if you're not following her already, do it now. We were chatting about it. I'm not going to give anything away. As we bring this episode to a close, what are your top 3 tips for our listeners when it comes to their sleep?
Yes. Okay. So number 1 is if you are struggling with sleep and things are not improving, let's say you try all of the things that we just talked about today and it's not working, don't wait to see a sleep doctor. You can go see somebody like Dr. Dasani, a sleep dentist, if you're worried about sleep breathing, or you can see a sleep physician like myself, but don't wait to talk to somebody. And if you're not sure who to talk to, just talk to someone, whether it's your dentist, your doctor, or somebody else, therapist, so that they can point you in the right direction, because sleep issues are highly treatable. So don't wait. That's number 1. Number 2 is okay, this is going to sound a little bit paradoxical, but don't try to focus too much on getting good sleep, because that can start to create more anxiety,
yes.
Right? And part of that is focusing on this 8 hours, this idea that you have to get 8 hours of sleep. And it's simply not true. For some people, they might just be getting 7 and that's fine. So just focus on what works for you, but don't fixate too much on getting the perfect sleep, because it creates actually more problems down the line. And then number 3 is to focus on what you're doing during the day. So the regularity of routines and regulating the circadian rhythm, regulating your hyperarousal levels, those helping yourself with those things is not only going to improve your sleep, but your overall health.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking time to come talk to me and sharing this knowledge with our listeners. For those that are tuning in, if you haven't caught the beginning of the episode, I will be dropping Dr. Bhopal's bio in the show notes, all of her social media handles, websites, ways you can contact her, follow her. Please do so. As always, you know somebody that needs to hear this. All of the entries drop, so do not hesitate. Share this session, leave us a review. And Dr. Bhopal, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me.